You want to know how to really torture a narcissist? Start by understanding what makes them tick and, more importantly, what makes them unravel. Let's start with their deepest, most protective vulnerability, ego dependence. It's their Achilles heel, the weak spot in the armor that looks so polished on the outside. And once you understand how this works, everything else, every tactic, every boundary, every act of reclaiming your power starts to make sense. A narcissist's ego isn't just large. It's fragile. That's a paradox most people miss. We assume arrogance equals confidence, but in the case of a narcissist, what you're seeing is often the opposite. Their confidence is a performance, their charm, a script, and that sense of superiority. A shield for something incredibly unstable underneath a self that is so underdeveloped and so hollow, it can only survive by leeching praise, attention, and admiration from other people. They don't just like validation, they depend on it like oxygen. Now, here's where the game changes. When you stop feeding that ego, they start to suffocate. Think of the narcissist as an addict not to substances but to supply. Narcissistic supply is anything that reinforces their inflated self-image. That includes admiration, approval, flattery, even fear. And if they can't get praise from you, they'll settle for provoking you into anger, sadness, even desperation, because in their mind, attention of any kind means they still matter. That's why you'll notice something peculiar when you stop reacting. They'll test you. They'll push your buttons, they'll throw tantrums, they'll love bomb, then ghost you. Not because they care, but because they need to restore control. And control, for a narcissist, is always about ego regulation. You might be thinking, but why are they like this? What made them so dependent on external validation? That's a fair question. Psychology tells us narcissism often develops in early childhood as a defense mechanism. Maybe they were overly praised for performance but never valued for who they were. Or maybe they were neglected, and this inflated self became a survival mask. Either way, they built a false self and the real self got buried. Now, as adults, they can't tolerate criticism, not because it's rude or painful, but because it threatens the entire identity structure they've built. If you say you hurt me, what they hear is you're not who you pretend to be. And that's existential terror for them. That's ego death. So how do you use this knowledge ethically, but effectively? You stop dancing for their approval. You stop arguing when they bait you. You stop explaining your worth. You stop defending yourself in a rigged courtroom where they're both judge and executioner. You start acting like someone who knows their value doesn't need permission to exist. That's what they can't handle, someone who refuses to orbit around them. It's not about cruelty. It's not about revenge. It's about understanding power, yours and theirs. And once you really see their power for what it is, borrowed, brittle, fake, you stop fearing it. You stop personalizing their attacks. You stop internalizing their projections, because you understand with brutal clarity that their strength only exists when you don't understand yours. And here's the beauty. When you pull away their supply, when you become emotionally neutral, grounded, unshaken, they begin to unravel. Not in a dramatic Hollywood villain way, but in the slow, quiet panic of someone who's losing the mirror they use to feel real. And that right there is what they fear the most, not anger, not confrontation, but irrelevance. So if you want to torture a narcissist again, ethically, you don't need to fight them. You just need to see them clearly. See through the mask. See past the performance. And then make the one choice they can't stand: refuse to play the game, because nothing tortures a narcissist more than a person who no longer sees them as important. Let that sink in. You've seen how withholding the ego supply unravels a narcissist's fragile facade. Now imagine taking that a step further, denying them the most basic currency they crave, your emotional reaction. It's not enough to simply stop engaging on their terms. You must consciously starve their need for attention in every interaction, until the very idea of provoking you feels pointless. Think of the gray rock method as your philosophical armor. Rocks don't feel, they don't react, they just exist. When a narcissist senses no spark, no flame, no opportunity to ignite drama, when their bait hits a wall of indifference, they lose their grip. They've built their identity on the assumption that others will feed their stories, amplify their importance, react to their slightest provocation. You dismantle that assumption by becoming uninteresting on purpose, flat, calm, unresponsive. This isn't passive aggression, it's active self-preservation. Psychology shows us that narcissists learn early to fine-tune their behavior based on the emotional yield of those around them. Anger, guilt, shame, any sign that they matter enough to affect you is a nutritional feast. So don't hand them a crumb. If they hurl insults, answer only with neutral acknowledgement. If they deploy charm offensives, smile politely and change the subject. When they attempt to gaslight you, refuse to be drawn into their labyrinth. The less reaction you give, the faster they hit cognitive dead ends. Philosophically, this speaks to a broader truth. You define your own emotional landscape. You own your reactions. By refusing to hand over your internal thermostat, you assert sovereignty over your mind. It's a radical act of personal freedom. You're telling the narcissist and yourself that your equilibrium isn't negotiable. You're not a puppet whose strings can be tugged at will. You're a grounded individual who chooses when, why, and how to feel. You might worry, isn't this cold? Won't people think I'm detached or uncaring? There's a difference between indifference and cruelty. You're not punishing the narcissist out of spite, you're simply protecting your ecosystem. In fact, by refusing to dramatize every insult or provocation, you reduce needless emotional waste. You conserve your energy for meaningful connections and genuine growth. And ironically, the more composed and centered you become, the less the narcissist storms affect you, and the more absurd their tantrums appear. Expect resistance. Narcissists will escalate their efforts, louder demands, more dramatic accusations, public displays designed to shame you. But each escalation is proof you're succeeding. Desperate people grasp at control. When that fails, they resort to spectacle. Let them perform their one-person show. You don't need a ticket. Observe if you must, but don't applaud. In philosophical terms, you're practicing radical non-engagement. You witness without becoming a participant. And here's where it all ties together. Starving a narcissist of attention doesn't just hurt them, it liberates you. You reclaim time, focus, and emotional bandwidth. You rediscover the simple pleasure of unshakable calm. You transform every attempted manipulation into a mirror reflecting their weakness and your strength. It's a live demonstration of power. True authority lies not in dominating others, but in mastering yourself. So the next time you face that dramatic plea for eyeballs on their performance, remember, your greatest act of rebellion and self-respect is to look away. If you've been following the pattern, you're starting to see the power shift. First, we cut off the ego supply. Then, we stop giving them attention, the emotional fuel that keeps their engine running. Now comes the next step, and it's probably the most uncomfortable for people who've been conditioned to keep the peace, setting firm boundaries. Let me be brutally honest here, narcissists hate boundaries. Not dislike, not misunderstand. Hate. Because boundaries do something they can't stand, they define where you end and they begin. And narcissists, by design, don't respect that line. To them, you're an extension of their will. Your time, your emotions, your energy, it all belongs to them. Or at least that's how they behave. So when you start drawing lines, they won't just push back. They'll question the line's existence altogether. That's what makes this step so important and so powerful. Boundaries are not about punishment. They're not ultimatums or threats. They're declarations of self-worth. You don't need to shout them or defend them. You just need to mean them. Now let's break down what a real boundary sounds like. Not "I wish you'd stop talking to me like that." That's a request, and requests are often ignored by narcissists. A boundary sounds like, "If you continue to speak to me like that, I will leave the conversation." Simple. Direct. No drama. And most importantly, actionable. Because here's the thing, boundaries only work when you enforce them. If you draw a line and they cross it, and you let it slide, that's not a boundary anymore. That's a suggestion. And narcissists don't respond to suggestions, they exploit them. They test everything. So if you say, "Don't text me after 10 p.m., and they blow up your phone at midnight, and you respond, game over. They now know your boundary isn't real, it's just a bluff. And once they know that, they'll keep pushing harder and louder until you're back in their control loop. So you have to be consistent. You have to be willing to walk away. Not in a dramatic storm out kind of way, but in a calm, decisive manner that says, "I take myself seriously even if you don't." And when you start doing this, something incredible happens. You begin to feel your own power again. Not power over them, but power over you, your time, your space, your peace. You stop reacting out of fear or guilt. You start responding from a place of clarity. And of course, they'll try to make you feel guilty for setting those boundaries. That's the oldest play in the narcissist handbook. They'll call you selfish, dramatic, cold, unforgiving. They'll weaponize your empathy, twist your words, and try to convince you that you're the one hurting them. I don't fall for it. That guilt you feel. That's not your conscience speaking. That's conditioning. That's the residue of manipulation. Here's where we pull back the lens. Philosophically, a boundary isn't just a limit. It's an affirmation of identity. It says, "I know who I am and I know what I will and won't tolerate." It's not about controlling someone else. It's about controlling your environment. And when you establish that sense of order, you invite respect. Not from the narcissist, they may never give it, but from yourself. And that's what matters. The truth is, a narcissist cannot coexist peacefully with someone who has strong, enforced boundaries. Eventually, one of two things happens. They adapt and shrink their influence, or they flee in search of easier prey. Either outcome is a win. Why? Because you're no longer living at the mercy of their chaos. You've probably noticed the deeper pattern by now. Each of these steps is about shifting focus off them and back onto you. That's the real game. That's the real win. Not revenge, not dominance, freedom. So here's the thought I want to leave you with. A boundary is not a wall. It's a doorway to a life they no longer control. Walk through it. Keep walking. Don't look back. By now, you've learned how to starve a narcissist's ego and deny them the emotional reactions they crave. You've set firm boundaries that protect your space and sanity. But here's the next crucial step: radical self-focus. This might sound selfish on the surface, but trust me, it's the opposite. It's opposite about reclaiming your life, your energy, your attention, and your purpose away from the constant gravitational pull of narcissistic drama. You see, narcissists thrive when you're tangled in their web, when your thoughts, feelings, and time revolve around their needs, their moods. They expect you to be a satellite, endlessly orbiting them. And if you don't, they punish you with confusion, manipulation, or outright hostility. So the key to disarming them lies in breaking that orbit. Radical self-focus means shifting your entire attention back to yourself. It means asking, what do I want? What do I need? What makes me whole? Not as a momentary escape, but as a deliberate, ongoing practice. This isn't narcissism in the clinical sense. It's self-care elevated to an art form. It's putting your emotional, mental, and physical health first, unapologetically. Philosophically, this is a profound act of rebellion. Because in a world that constantly demands your energy for others, especially for those who seek to control you, choosing yourself is revolutionary. It's saying no to being a tool or a stage prop in their story. Instead, you start writing your own script, crafting your own script. From a psychological perspective, this shift rewires your brain. The more you focus on your own goals, your own healing, your own growth, the less power the narcissist chaos has over you. You rebuild your self-esteem not on their approval, but on your accomplishments, your values, and your progress. That's real, unshakable strength. Imagine it like this. You're no longer playing their game, where the scoreboard is attention and control. You're playing your own game, where the wins are peace, joy, and authenticity. When you center yourself, you create an internal gravity that no narcissist can pull you away from. And what's fascinating is how this radical self-focus disorients the narcissist. They expect you to respond to their drama, to get caught up in their schemes. But when you don't, when you're busy building your life, they lose relevance. They can't manipulate what's not available. They become irrelevant, and narcissists fear irrelevance more than anything else. Of course, this isn't easy. It requires conscious effort, daily practice, and sometimes painful detachment. You might need to cut ties with toxic relationships, reduce contact, or create physical and emotional distance. But every step you take towards yourself is a step away from their control. Think of radical self-focus as a fortress with high walls, not walls that isolate you, but walls that protect your core. Inside those walls, you nurture your dreams, your values, your peace. Outside, the narcissist's influence diminishes. Here's a common misconception. Some people confuse radical self-focus with selfishness or abandonment. But there's a critical difference. Self-focus is about nourishment. Selfishness is about depletion. When you prioritize yourself, you're not taking from others, you're filling your own cup so that you can engage with the world from a place of strength and authenticity. This shift also helps clarify your priorities. It's easier to say no to manipulation when you know what yes truly means for you. It's easier to enforce boundaries when your identity isn't entangled with their approval. It's easier to walk away when your life is rich with meaning beyond their presence. So here's the real insight. The best way to torture a narcissist is not through confrontation or retaliation. It's by making yourself indispensable to yourself first. When you become your own anchor, your own source of validation and joy, you take away the very thing they need to thrive, your emotional availability. And that, my friends, is the quietest and most profound revolution you can wage. So I challenge you, start today, not tomorrow, not next week. Shift your focus. Reclaim your energy. Invest in your own growth, because the moment you do, you don't just free yourself, you dismantle the narcissist's power from the inside out. Remember this, you are not here to orbit their chaos. You are here to shine your own light. Keep your eyes on that light and watch how everything else falls away. You've learned how to starve a narcissist's ego, refuse their emotional base, set firm boundaries, and refocus your energy on yourself. Now comes a step that requires a bit more courage, but can be incredibly freeing, exposing their behavior, not recklessly or vindictively, but strategically and safely, because narcissists rely on invisibility, on keeping their true selves hidden behind charm, manipulation, and gaslighting. When you shine a light on their reality, it's like ripping off the mask that allows them to operate. Let's be clear, exposing a narcissist is not about revenge or public shaming, it's about reclaiming truth and protecting yourself and sometimes others from harm. Narcissists live in a carefully constructed fantasy where they appear perfect, righteous, or indispensable. That fantasy thrives because people around them doubt their own perceptions. The narcissist gaslights, spins narratives, and isolates victims so their false image goes unchallenged. But every falsehood has cracks, and when those cracks are documented, witnessed, or shared, the illusion begins to crumble. It's psychological judo. Use their own patterns against them. Imagine a workplace scenario where a narcissistic boss takes credit for others' work or manipulates team members. If no one speaks up, the cycle continues. But if someone carefully documents incidents, gathers support from witnesses, and presents facts calmly and clearly, the boss's power weakens. The truth doesn't always topple them immediately, but it plants seeds of doubt in others and limits their ability to manipulate freely. In personal relationships, exposure can mean setting clear, factual boundaries, telling your story without emotional drama, or seeking help from trusted friends, therapists, or legal professionals. It's about breaking isolation and refusing to carry the burden alone. The narcissist hates this because exposure threatens their core strategy, control through deception. Philosophically, exposure is about shining light in the darkness. It's about affirming reality against illusion. It reminds us that power rooted in lies is inherently unstable. When truth is visible, manipulation loses its grip. That's why narcissists fight so fiercely to keep their secrets and maintain appearances. But exposing a narcissist must be done with care. It's essential to protect yourself emotionally and physically. Not every situation is safe to confront openly. Sometimes exposure means quietly collecting evidence, strengthening your support system, and planning an exit strategy. Other times, it might mean calmly correcting lies or inconsistencies when they arise in conversation, without anger or desperation, simply stating facts that others can see and verify. This measured approach does two things. It avoids giving the narcissist more emotional reactions to exploit, and it builds your credibility, making your truth harder to dismiss. Remember, narcissists are masters of spin, but they cannot spin everything, especially not facts witnessed by multiple people. Exposure also has an internal effect. When you stop hiding the reality of the narcissist's behavior, you reclaim your narrative. You stop doubting yourself, you regain clarity about what you've endured. That clarity fuels your healing and your confidence. It's empowering to know that the truth is on your side. And here's an important nuance. Exposing the narcissist's behavior is not about needing validation from others. It's about protecting yourself and setting the record straight for your own peace of mind. It's an act of self-respect, not an invitation to public spectacle. In a larger sense, this is a reminder that light is the ultimate purifier. When we refuse to hide abuse, manipulation, or deception, we reclaim power. The narcissist's kingdom is built on shadows. Without those shadows, their reign crumbles. So the next time you face a situation where a narcissist tries to rewrite reality or undermine you, consider this: you don't have to engage in their drama, but you can reveal the truth in a calm, strategic way. You can gather your facts, speak with clarity, and refuse to carry the weight of secrecy. That, in itself, is a form of resistance, a form of freedom. So I want you to leave this with a simple but powerful thought: truth is the sword that cuts through illusion. And don't be afraid to wield it wisely and watch how the narcissist's empire trembles under its light. You've learned how to starve a narcissist's ego, withhold your emotional reactions, set strong boundaries, focus on yourself, and expose their false realities. Now comes the final, perhaps most transformative strategy: cultivating your own inner peace and resilience. Because in the end, the greatest torture for a narcissist isn't confrontation, exposure, or even withdrawal, it's your unshakable calm. Think about it. Narcissists live in a world of chaos and control. Their power depends on creating emotional storms around them, turbulence that forces others to react, to bend, to surrender pieces of themselves. Their victories are measured by how much turmoil they generate, how much they can destabilize your sense of self. So when you maintain an inner sanctuary of peace, when you refuse to be swept away by their waves, you essentially deny them their playground. This is not about suppressing your emotions or pretending everything is fine. It's about building resilience, a deep well of strength rooted in self-awareness, mindfulness, and acceptance. It's about cultivating a mental fortress where their provocations bounce off without leaving scars. This kind of peace is earned through practice and intention, not passivity. Psychologically, resilience rewires your responses. Instead of reacting impulsively to every slight or manipulation, you develop a space between stimulus and response. You learn to observe your emotions without being overwhelmed by them. This pause allows you to choose how to act, whether to engage, disengage, or simply let things pass. That choice is power. And power, when wielded with calm, is the most effective tool against narcissistic abuse. Philosophically, cultivating peace is an act of freedom. It's saying you cannot control my inner world. No matter how loud the narcissist's chaos gets, it cannot penetrate this calm core. You reclaim sovereignty over your mind, and once you own that, their efforts become irrelevant. This inner peace also guards your mental health and well-being. Narcissistic interactions often leave people feeling drained, anxious, or doubting themselves. Building resilience is a protective shield against these effects. It helps you maintain clarity and confidence even in the face of manipulation. But how do you cultivate this peace? It starts with self-care and awareness. Practices like meditation, journaling, or simply spending quiet time with yourself can help you reconnect with your center. Therapy or support groups can provide tools and validation. Setting realistic expectations about the narcissist's behavior also reduces frustration. You stop hoping for change and start focusing on what you can control. Another key is forgiveness, not of the narcissist, but of yourself. Many people carry guilt or shame from these relationships, blaming themselves for tolerating abuse or feeling weak. Forgiving yourself for past mistakes frees you to move forward without carrying unnecessary baggage. It's an essential step toward healing and peace. And here's the crucial part: inner peace is contagious. When you embody calm and resilience, it changes the dynamics around you. It can diffuse conflicts, inspire others, and even subtly challenge the narcissist's control. They feed on chaos, but peace is their kryptonite. Imagine a room where a narcissist tries to provoke drama, but everyone is centered, grounded, and unshaken. Their power collapses because the environment no longer supports their game. That's the ripple effect your inner peace can create. So what does this mean for you? It means your ultimate act of power isn't a confrontation or an argument. It's a daily commitment to your own well-being and peace. It's choosing to invest in yourself, to build a life where narcissistic manipulation has no foothold. It's recognizing that the most profound resistance is silent, steady, and serene. Let me leave you with this thought: the strongest walls are not made of stone, but of quiet, unwavering peace. Build yours and watch how the narcissist's chaos crumbles against it. This is not just survival. This is triumph.